Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
My name's Miyashiro. I'm an organizational development consultant. I do strategic planning consulting, and I've incorporated the idea of empathy and the quality of connection between people in the room when I'm facilitating processes, and it's really added a new level of productivity.
So what I was interested in finding out is, how did empathy become important to you, and if there were like milestones in your life? So if you even go back to your childhood, were your parents empathic people, and did you learn empathy from them, or kind of what happened along your life's arc?
Yeah, well, I think, having heard that question, I would say that where I really learned and saw the power of empathy was when I went to work in workplaces as a consultant. I couldn't name it, and it's so obvious when it's there and when it's not. So that's the first thing I noticed. And then the second thing is how powerful it is when it is there, happening between people, particularly in a group of people. I would say that I have come to empathy kind of on the flip side, that maybe it was mostly absent or not, I didn't receive or see a lot of it as I was growing up. And as I got into work, I saw more and more the power of it. And actually, I think connecting with my own needs, understanding what was going on for me and filling myself so that I could be of more service to others has been something that surprised me as a consultant. And so I'm pleased, and I see how much more I can offer knowing how to fill myself so that I don't do that when I'm with my clients.
So you kind of learned sort of a self-empathy.
Yes.
For yourself.
Yes, because for me, self-empathy is not only about soothing or taking care of myself, or when others do practice self-empathy, taking care of themselves. It's really about learning about yourself. It's increasing the level of awareness about what really makes, what we value. And anyone who has a high level of awareness about what they value, the higher the awareness of what you value from an internal place, the higher the value I believe you can contribute to others, because you have some sense of neutrality inside of you. For consultants, for people who facilitate, I think this is very powerful to be able to have that place. And that's why in the nonviolent communication process particularly, I'm a strong believer in the idea that we are working to grow ourselves before we show up to support others. So the modeling is as important as the teaching. And in fact, from what my clients share with me, the modeling is possibly more important.
Were there some stories of kind of where you kind of learned insights along the way that were pivotal?
Yes, yes. So this is a story about how explicit teaching is different than modeling. So modeling means showing up, practicing and living the idea of connecting with my own feelings and needs and connecting with the feelings and needs of others. That's in a nutshell the process of NVC. And it's needs-based. The needs are what's paramount versus the feelings, although feelings are important, can be important pointers towards needs that are met or unmet. So I worked with a group of about 40 people at a university in Southeast United States, a strategic planning session. We were having dialogue. I was facilitating this dialogue. And it was very charged. Many of these people had never been invited to that kind of conversation, that level of authority in the decision making. 2 days we worked together. At the end of it, several of the faculty came up to me and said, "What is this different way that you speak? We've never heard anyone speak like this." So when I heard that, I asked for more specific observations, and they were able to name specific things like less comparative words. So instead of saying that's great, you're better than, this idea is better than the other, to make specific observations that were neither comparing nor in their minds evaluative, just stating kind of the observation. So that was new to them, seeing what it was. And also the pacing and the way, as a facilitator, I was receiving what they said, repeating it, not just to mirror, but to actually go deeper and identify and name and guess what some needs underneath what they were saying were about. So they were reporting a sense of being heard that they hadn't had before, a sense of being understood. And in any kind of strategic conversation where you're bringing many different people together with a variety of opinions, each person feeling and thinking that they're being heard is absolutely imperative to moving the group forward as a unit.
But how did you learn that empathy to begin with?
I guess I saw it. Like I said, I've always known when I've received it, but I never heard it outlined until I met Marshall Rosenberg. I spent 5 days with him in Atlanta in 2005. And when I was sitting there hearing him describe the process of nonviolent communication, and not just the process, because the process is almost simplistic, but all the key distinctions that define that needs-based awareness that goes with the language, I was excited because I had so much clarity over what it was that I had seen for the 24 years before in my career in the workplaces that I had now I was able to name as empathy. So the fact that he names things in a particular way, that nonviolent communication makes discrete distinctions between elements like observation, feelings, needs, and requests, is simplistic and yet very powerful in that clarity.
So it sounds like it was that workshop where you kind of gained an insight of starting to use the word empathy.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure when I really connected with the word empathy per se in that, time that I was with Marshall. But I've come to have a very different opinion about the word empathy itself. I see it used more and more frequently by leaders in not only the political realm, but also the corporate world, nonprofit, NGOs. And I believe the reason is because we're coming to a new definition of it, and our interdependence, both in terms of, from a commerce standpoint, collaboration, is so heightened right now. And I think people understand that empathy is a powerful tool. People know when they've received it, when it's absent. And I've really enjoyed the idea that empathy will be a more commonly used word.
So it sounds like your understanding of empathy is evolving?
It's evolving, and I would say my comfort level with using the word empathy is evolving, based on the fact that I see more and more research occurring in the organizational dynamics area and also in business. And for me, this validates something we probably have all known, but haven't been comfortable naming. Yeah.
So in terms of naming it, how do you actually define empathy? What's kind of your working definition of empathy?
Yeah, well, I've heard several things that I think are slightly different that I enjoy about the definition of empathy. One is simply something most people might say, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes so you know what it's like. Imagine that you're them. So that's a very a use of imagination on how to really connect with someone. I think another piece that I heard that I enjoyed is the distinction between empathy and compassion. I've heard it described that empathy we're kind of hardwired to do, that it comes naturally to us in most circumstances as members of the human species. And that is, again, this sense that we are at some level really connected, not just emotionally, but almost physiologically, neurologically. More studies are coming out about this. The neuroscience of empathy, for example. So that's a second way that I've enjoyed. And then the third piece really, I think, is the work of nonviolent communication. The ability to present a practical methodology, the 4 parts of nonviolent communication, really do work. It's a repeatable, learnable, scalable way to share empathy as a workplace skill, to develop and nurture empathy as a workplace skill or a personal skill. And so I'm very excited about nonviolent communication for that reason. Having said that, I want to be clear that many, many people are natural empaths, can connect with people empathically, communicate and listen empathically, and have never heard of nonviolent communication or any other type of modality for empathy. So, it doesn't belong to anyone, it belongs to all of us. And at the same time, I enjoy the clarity and ease with which I have learned to develop more empathic skills, and I've seen others do it through the practice of nonviolent communication.
Well, you use the metaphors of standing in someone else's shoes and walking a mile in their shoes, which is a metaphor.
Yes.
And I like to ask people about creating their own metaphor. So if you were imagining your own metaphor of empathy being, a type of animal or type of land or pretty much just anything like that, what would be your metaphor for empathy?
I've never been asked that before, and in the moment what comes to me is an image of the sun, kind of warming, rays from the sun, warming you and me at the same time, all of us at the same time, with no discrimination whatsoever, and generously flowing out from a source onto the whole planet. That's the picture I got.
So it's that physical warmth that you're actually kind of tapping into.
Yeah, and I think that is something that's true for me, that people have reported to me, and I've also experienced that when I am in a place where there's empathic connection, either with myself, with others, or what might be going on in a larger group, I think there is a physiological sense of warmth and energy.
Yeah, so when you're relating to the people, you're feeling, and you're empathizing with them, you're feeling a sense of warmth with them.
Yes, and connection, that we're all in a shared environment.
How do we go about building a culture of empathy? And a culture of empathy is within our families, with our friends, within businesses, within the larger culture at large. How can we kind of shift to a culture that supports and nurtures empathy?
I believe that there's 2 ways to nourish a culture of empathy. One is simply one person at a time. The connection I have with you in this moment, what I might share with someone else who I know well or may not know well. Everything from the most intimate relationships we have to relationships that might be fleeting and casual. Those connections, when there's a deep empathic connection, which does not take a long time, it could be just a few seconds even, can be so profound for people that it can create a change in them. I've seen it happen, and I've experienced it for myself. And I have stories about that. I don't know if you want a story. Well, one of my first experiences after really becoming engaged with the practice of nonviolent communication, I was on an airplane ride coming back from Florida for some work there, and there was a gentleman who got on the plane, and he was speaking in a voice louder than most people wanted, and came on just before the doors closed, was bumping around a little bit, not very stable on his feet. And the flight attendants asked him to sit down. And then there was, a lot of commotion and activity in that area. I saw some people turning towards him to, look with faces that I would interpret as irritation or annoyance. And he happened to sit in the aisle, across the aisle from me. And we took off, and I didn't think much about that. He settled in, and things were quiet. And then as soon as we were able to get up from our seats, he went up and wanted to order, something to drink, an alcoholic beverage. And I saw the back of his T-shirt, and it had a Maltese fireman's cross. And it said something about Iraq firefighters. So I knew he was in the service. And when he came back, I mentioned to him, I said to him that I was grateful for what he was offering. This was early on in the campaign in Iraq, so I really hadn't had a chance to talk to anyone. And I just, out of my curiosity, started asking him what it was like for him. Over the period of about 10 or 15 minutes, just my connecting with him, asking questions, led to him at one point sharing what was going on for him, his experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. I never offered advice or opinions. I just listened, asked open-ended questions out of my own curiosity and connection with him. I really enjoyed my conversation with him, what he was saying. I was learning something and really enjoying hearing what it was like for him. And at one point, he had tears starting to come. And he turned away, and I gave him, I met his need for privacy by turning away. And he sat for a while, and later we talked again, and he just said something about how good it felt to just talk, because so many people had judged what he was doing as wrong, and that he had so much pain about what he was seeing there. His job was to remove bodies from sites that were bombed or wreckage areas. And so we sat quietly for a while, and then I walked off the plane with him, and again we were chatting, and he was meeting his mother, and he just told me how much it just meant to him to be listened to. Although at one point he did ask me if I was a reporter, because he had never had people just ask questions who weren't reporters. Usually they were giving him his opinion. So when he knew I wasn't a reporter and that I had no other intention but to really hear him, he felt some relief, and I think that's why the tears came.
Are there any other stories like that were kind of meaningful for you, where you experienced empathy?
Oh, I've worked with executives who have so much passion for the work that they're doing and so much fondness and feeling for their employees that sometimes when we're beginning our consulting process and we do confidential interviews, I hear their stories about what pain they might be in, and also what they would like for themselves often, as well as for the people they work with. And this process, again, I think because I think when you sit with someone from a place of neutrality, which for me is a form of empathy, where we empty ourselves to just hear what's going on for the other person, I believe transformation can happen, deep change, not because we're doing anything to them or for them, other than holding a space for them to be able to get in touch with what's going on for them and to be heard.
So in terms of nurturing or building a culture of empathy, so it sounded like one way was just to do it yourself and to kind of model it. Were there other approaches or ways?
Empathy, learning how to grow into a place within yourself where you're least likely to be triggered by what's going on around you, is a practice of not only self-empathy, but self-awareness. I would say any practice that increases self-awareness is a companion piece to empathy. And in fact, many workplaces now are paying for and providing employees with time to meditate, time to journal, time to go for walks during their lunch breaks, fitness, nutrition. These are all companion pieces to self-care. So when we are filled ourselves, I think we have more to offer others and can be of more service, I think, in many more circumstances because we're less likely to get triggered. I believe that that is the core, that ultimately all things begin with how much we have to give. Sometimes, I mean, there are exceptions to this. I've had moments where, many moments where I've been in a place where I'm feeling not as resourceful as I would like, and maybe experience some discomfort or uneasiness about something that I'm thinking about. And in those cases, I think sometimes it's very powerful to put ourselves aside and do something in service for others. And I have also found the second strategy that works, which is when we are in need of empathy ourselves, to actually put that aside and give it to others when we can find the resourcefulness within us to do that. And then I then find that my need for whatever was going on for me is met out of, just contributing to someone else. So that compassionate, there's an action part of empathy that to me is important. Empathic action and empathic communication, and compassionate action. Something that results in not just empathy itself, but a change in the world. Well, I think the thing I would say in summary, I think the piece that I really resonate with is the idea that empathy and connecting, the quality of connection we have with others, is powerful and critical to the kind of world that meets more needs for everyone. At the same time, I would say that it's really empathic action that comes out of our ability to connect with others, that really creates the change we want to see in the world. And it doesn't matter if it's in a large community, or if it's in our workplaces or our neighborhoods. Wherever it is that we are, I think there's always room for the kind of empathic action that can result from the quality of increased connection through empathy that will benefit more people and meet more needs.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.